started with 4 stages: recognition, registration, comprehension, integration. Now we can complete the beginning of that pattern by expanding the section on aids. And we note there that at that particular section, we were concerned with the way that the eyes move, how they actually grouped words when they were reading, how you could actually handle the whole process better by using a visual guide. Now, so far then, our 2 pages of notes will look like this. Okay, I'm going to now move on to the other 2 sections, memory and words. Starting with memory, you'll recall that recall was one of the most important words, and that during a learning period, you recall first and last things better, and those items which are repeated or associated. Now, in the memory program, we summarize this with 2 graphs. So again here, you link the number 2 on the right-hand page with the pattern on the left-hand page. The 2 graphs here concern firstly the fact that we remember more at the beginning, more at the end, more of things which are repeated or associated, more of the things which are outstanding. And the second graph shows how your understanding and recall work in better harmony when you have small study periods, 20 to 40 minutes, with breaks in between. Now, we also talked about understanding and recall in conjunction with review. And once again, we use graphs here. The graphs, again, we code with the number 3 so that they fit or connect to the pattern. The first of these graphs shows that we recall a little bit more afterwards and then have that rapid decline, tripping over a word hook there. And the second graph shows that the rise in recall and understanding and knowledge can be maintained as long as you review properly. So memories are made of this. Now, you should be able to complete the pattern on words fairly easily. Standard word usage meant wastage of about 90%. I said that words were symbols and that they relied on hooks. And the word symbols were divided into 2 parts, the creative and the recall. And we talked of the trigger effect on keywords. Now, this then is going to be our whole approach to note-taking in the future. Let's look at the complete set of notes before moving on. You can see that looking at these, the whole pattern of the information is clear, that the linear information is easily recognized and linked with the pattern form. Now, that's all right, you might say, but yours were prepared and neat. If I did the same kind of thing, mine would be messy and disorganized, so the pattern method might be no good. Well, let's have a look then at what we mean by the word messy. Let's assume that you're in a situation in which the lecturer is particularly bad. And so you're writing notes in pattern form, and he comes up with various points which he then disconnects, and you find that that doesn't really connect with there, so you have to cross it out, and you also have to cross out this bit here. He carries on, and you find that there are question marks here, that you don't agree with what he says here, that you're adding bits down here which you later realize don't connect there, so you have to circle those and put an arrow over here, that those 4 were not perhaps complete, and so you have to add more and cross out one of them, and that you end up with what you might really consider a mess. Now, we've got to look then at what we mean by that word, a mess. Messy, like all other words, has many hooks, and 2 of the most important ones are messy to look at and messy as far as the information is concerned. Now, let's look then at this messy bunch, and imagine it, if you like, as even more messy than this. The question is it messy to look at, and is it messy for getting information from? Now, you will find that as far as getting information from it is concerned, it's quite neat. Even though it looks messy, you can immediately tell by looking at this kind of page of notes where the questions arose during the lecture, where isolated little groups exist, where connections had to take place, where disagreements took place with the lecturer, where things had to be added and subtracted. So you find that although it looks messy, it isn't messy as far as the information is concerned. Now let's look at standard notes. We find that here they are, all very neat and nice to look at. But where is the information? Nowhere in here does it say where the questions were. Nowhere does it explain how the note taker disagreed or agreed with the actual lecturer. Nowhere does it show how these things connect with each other. Looking at this is just a bunch of very similar looking print that doesn't give you any immediate information. So it turns out then that as far as information is concerned, and that's what we're concerned about when we're taking notes, even a messy looking pattern is better than neat looking linear notes. But fortunately, even this messiness can be overcome. And we overcome it by relating to the memory program and the review graph. You recall that just after learning period, your memory rises, and at that point, you have to do your first review. Now you do that by copying out the messy pattern into a neat final form. Your next review simply takes the form of a blank page of notes on which you jot down whatever you can recall, compare with your originals, check, correct, and then move on to your next review, in which case you take another blank page, jot down what you can recall, and compare it again with your recall notes, making whatever corrections are necessary. So the patterns and the review fit in perfectly. You can recall more from your patterns anyway when you're reviewing. Now, what other uses can we put these patterns to? Well, so far I've mentioned notes, and you also know that they can be used at the beginnings and ends of television programs for the credits. But there are other uses. You can use them for problem solving, for creative thinking, for essay and speech preparation, for any thought organization. You can use them for diaries. I mentioned last week that you might try keeping a little diary of keywords. Try this week keeping a diary in pattern form. Now, there are many other uses. During the week, try and come up with them and practice with them. Now, I've mentioned that the patterns are in fact reflections of your mind. But what we've got so far certainly isn't a total reflection. Remember that there are colors in here and dimensions. And next week, we're going to be investigating some of those other dimensions. Psychological textbooks were saying that the mind and the eye that went with it were similar to the workings of a camera. Camera is a fairly simple object. Light goes in through the lens, and the image is then received on the photographic plate. The lens being the eye, the photographic light-sensitive plate, the mind. So I direct this at an object. Light from the object comes towards the camera, goes through the lens and onto the photographic plate when I press the shutter. This is now a permanent record, and if we want to look around the object, we must keep pressing the button. Making such a record can be a rather tedious process, and it doesn't really describe how our minds work. Our minds, in fact, record multi-dimensional image, and they can look around these. They don't have to resort to a series of two-dimensional linear photographs. Let's look again, then, at the photographic process. If I want further information about this, I would have to take off the top and rephotograph. Now, our minds can imagine the outside and the inside and all around. If I want to look around This photograph